For my podcast, I decided to focus more on Lacey and Hospital's article on the media framing of black looters. When Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, there was close to 2,000 deaths along with 300,000 destroyed homes and $150 billion in damage. A lot of aid and support was needed. The media has the power to inform people of what's going on in the world. They also have the power to influence the people's decisions about world news. In this case, the media had the power to bring Americans together in support for New Orleans. Instead, the media portrayed New Orleans in two categories after Hurricane Katrina. Those two categories were the apocalyptic scene and fallen heroes. For those of you who don't know what apocalyptic means, it's defined as describing the complete destruction of the world. The media was referring to African Americans as being black brutes that were looting, raping, and murdering others during the time of Hurricane Katrina. In Lacey and Hospital's article, it was also said that news reports about these black brutes were very exaggerated or even false. These media reports were being believed to actually have slowed down the response to the disaster and tarnished the image of victims. The media developed this idea and image that New Orleans after the hurricane had become a swamp full of sinful creatures in the form of African Americans. The media continued to push this image into the world's minds by publishing pictures of African Americans emerging from fire, smoke, gas, and dark skies to resemble the unearthly atmosphere and reflect on the African Americans as not being human. In some reports, African Americans were being referred to as savages and cockroaches. African American survivors were called looters. These looters were described as irrational, immature, dangerous animals, and even rapists. There were 323 news stories about Hurricane Katrina. The word looter appeared 364 times. The apocalyptic scene that was constantly being harped on by the media was constantly fueled by lawlessness, anarchy, and chaos. Meanwhile, the white victims of Hurricane Katrina were portrayed as heroes. At the time of the hurricane, there was a lot of blame on the government for the lack of support and supplies to New Orleans. It was at this time that the media hyped up the image of white people by saying that they were being the heroes of New Orleans. The media began publishing pictures of African Americans holding TVs and new clothing and labeling them as looters, while they published pictures of white people saving children and protecting their families. Media reports were coming out and saying that white people were rescuing women and children from the clutches of the dangerous, demonic, and dark masculine brutes. The National Guard came to aid the disaster, and then the media portrayed it as New Orleans being run over by the brutes, and there needed to be militarism in order to regain control of the situation. This topic reflects back on what we discussed last week with the stereotypes and representation. African Americans were stereotyped as villains while white people represented heroes. The media created these stereotypes and misrepresentations and overall hurt the recovery time of New Orleans. After reading this article, it was very eye-opening to me to see how much more damage and harm the media had done during the disaster of Hurricane Katrina than it had done good. With that being said, I would like to open a discussion with the following three questions. Number one, if the media portrayed everyone the same with the same problems and left race out of the stories, do you think that there would be more aid and more would have been given from outside donations and things of that matter? For the second question is, after hearing how the media divided and identified races after Hurricane Katrina, why do you think the media portrayed African Americans as brutes and white people as heroes? For the third and final question, I would like to ask, why do you think that the media went out of its way to target and publish images of African Americans holding TVs in their hands and white people carrying rescued children in theirs when all races were struggling from the same disaster? So please feel free to answer the questions and get back to me. Thanks for watching my podcast.